Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete episode 10 of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge, and we are starting things off just like we left off last time, with Steak psychotically wandering around, but at least no longer plagued by toxic fallout. Now, the last episode was a little uneventful at times, so in the attempt to make up for that we opened up an ancient danger near the end. And, well, thanks to the help of an adventurous caravan, we succeeded, and so we are now in the possession of several valuable items. They are not of any immediate use to us, though, and they are also somewhat increasing our colony wealth, so any upcoming raids might be a tiny bit more dangerous, but with our traps in place and a good bolt-action rifle equipped, we should hopefully be fine. Now, to start today's episode off, we sadly can't do much more but to watch Steak wander around. With the fallout finally gone, there are many plans I have for today, but for the time being, the only thing Steak actually achieves is going to bed. And because he refuses to eat in the middle of the night, then starvation kicks in. On the next morning though, Steak at least grabs a fine meal. Still, it takes him until the late evening of that very same day to finally shake off the mental break, and at this point some kibble and some rest are the only sensible things left for him. At night then, we have another quest appear, and this one could be extremely interesting. We are being informed here that a 42-year-old survivor named Jess is begging us for safety, as he is currently being chased by 4 manhunting ducks. Much more importantly though, Jess actually offers to join the colony should we accept this quest, and well, since 4 ducks seem pretty manageable, especially with 2 colonists to fight them off, I would say accepting this quest is exactly what we'll do. It only takes a few moments and there he is now, our second colonist, who will of course immediately receive a new name chosen from the list of patrons in the naming rights tier and above, and the name that was randomly chosen from that list this time is Edmo, so congratulations and welcome Edmo, we hope you'll like it here. Now, before we jump back into the action, let's take a moment here to get to know our colonist, and one thing we can immediately see here is that Edmo should be very useful. With a burning passion in the plant skill, he will likely take over all the farming work around the base, but he can also hold his own in a fight, both from range and in close quarters. All in all, he seems pretty well rounded, despite being incapable of animal work, arts or firefighting, but I feel like that is more than made up for by his 2 traits, Quick Sleeper and Tough. Quick Sleeper allows him to fill his need for rest much faster than regular colonists, so he doesn't need to spend as much time in bed, while Tough has him only take half the damage of a normal colonist, and I don't think I have to mention how incredibly useful that might be. Now, unfortunately, in his health tab we see a few issues here, most notably an ambrosia addiction. Now, an addiction is of course always a bit of a problem, but since ambrosia is extremely hard to get a hold of, especially in the early game, I think we don't really have any other choice but to send Edmo into somewhat of a forced rehab, which he will of course hardly enjoy, so we will see the occasional mental break, but in the long run I think we're better off this way. Now, the old gunshot and the scratch scar here, those are of course a bit more long-term in nature, and they're causing 2 smaller issues. The gunshot is causing pain, which in turn has a negative effect on Edmo's mood, while the scar on his right leg slows him down a little, not a whole lot of course, but enough to keep it in mind for any potential firefights. Finally then we have his gear, and you can already see he comes with 2 units of ambrosia in his inventory, and we will likely let him consume those, he is addicted to it anyway, and this might make the first few days a bit more enjoyable while we're getting a shelter for him up and running. One thing we can also see here is that his clothing is not exactly adequate for the extreme desert. The bearskin parka, for example, is more or less useless out here, and the shirt and pants do not nearly provide enough temperature protection, so that's one more reason for Steak to keep researching complex clothing, which will then give us the option to make Edmo here something a bit more adequate. Now, only a few seconds after Edmo has made it to the colony, his pursuers arrive as well, and as advertised, we are dealing with 4 manhunting ducks here. Now, the simplest approach here, and the one we will be taking, is to simply let them sit outside of the base for a while. That way they can't hurt anyone and breaking into the base is hardly possible for them, and after a few hours they will probably fall asleep or simply leave the map entirely because of a lack of food, so we should not have to worry too much about them. As a matter of fact, we're actually worrying so little about them that we bring our traps back inside of the base. Otherwise, a duck might trigger it, and while that will inevitably cause its death, it will also waste precious resources. Resources that we could definitely use against more challenging opponents. Now at this point, Steak can go back to bed and continue his night, while Edmo is already preparing for some field work. As you remember, due to the fallout, we had our entire base roofed over, which then ultimately also caused all of our plants to die. And while having a roof over the base is actually not the worst thing in the world, our fields of course require direct sunlight, so let's give them some. While Edmo is busy and Steak is still sleeping, we then have visitors arrive. Only a small group, but they do have something to trade, and one of them is actually named Pete, so they are probably worth talking to. Of course, they are also attracting the attention of the man-hunting ducks, so it looks like we have yet another problem take care of itself. The least we can do though is provide some firing support with Steak, although with the ducks shifting their focus over to him, we will retreat back inside pretty quickly. Our visitors meanwhile are doing a good job against the ducks. As you can see, a lone iguana is also benefiting from the situation, and so the desert around us nicely keeps its balance. With all the ducks taken out and a good amount of rice planted as well, we can now haul their corpses back into the base. Edmo can for the time being equip the pump shotgun, a weapon that should hopefully serve him well against the iguana, because of course we will not leave that running around. It appears though as if Randy has read our thoughts, and just as Edmo is sneaking up on his target, the iguana goes manhunter as well. Thankfully though, our new colonist is a good shooter, and so the iguana goes down in just 2 hits. We can now add it to the meal plan, and with all threats eliminated, I would say it's time to start trading. After all, I would assume that was what Pete and his companions were here to do in the first place. Unfortunately though, their stock is pretty limited. There is really only one thing that makes sense to purchase here, and that is the 1 unit of medicine they have to offer. The price of 30 silver is easily affordable for us, and so an uneventful trade already comes to an end. Shortly after then, all animal corpses have been hauled into the base, and I would say it's high time to give Edmo his own place to stay. Sharing a room with Steak is of course not an option. His bedroom is already getting pretty crowded anyway, so Edmo will get his own proper chambers. The 5x5 layout here is identical to Steak's room, and we're using limestone to construct the walls. We have enough of it for the time being and definitely don't want to use any more steel than necessary. With Steak and Edmo working hand in hand, the room is then constructed fairly quickly, and we will also replace the walls on the left side here with limestone. That way we free up enough units of steel to construct a steel door. And there we go. With night slowly setting across the desert, Edmo now has his own place to stay. For now, the bedroll will have to suffice as his sleeping spot, but of course a proper bed will follow soon. And so, after a day of farming, constructing, and in Steak's case a bit of researching, we can send our 2 colonists off to bed. This is also the first we see of Edmo's quick sleeper trait in action, and I think the effects are pretty obvious here. His rest meter is rising much quicker than we used to, and so he will only require a few hours of sleep each night. And while our colony is asleep, we have another quest coming in, and the name Heatwave for Pay pretty much tells the whole story already. The offer here is fairly simple, but you can of course pause and read the entire thing if you want to. What it comes down to is that we're being offered to take on a 4.5-day heatwave in exchange for what I can only call a meager payment. 1 unit of Glitterworld medicine and some silver are in my opinion definitely not a fair price for this. This heatwave might very well destroy our freshly planted crops, and we also want to keep in mind that Edmo is still somewhat ill-prepared for higher temperatures, so I think we can safely pass on this. Instead, we are skipping ahead to the next morning, where Edmo is already putting all the traps back into place, and then it's time for something new on the fields. As you know, in the past we have been growing rice and potatoes, but now we are switching the potato field over to haygrass. Now, haygrass is normally inedible for humans. The only exception is if it's made into kibble. And since our two colonists are already feeding on kibble anyway, we're not really losing anything here. Instead, we can in fact now grow the most profitable crop in the entire game. Its growth time is actually even a little bit higher than that of potatoes, but the harvest yield is much higher, making haygrass the most efficient crop to grow in this game. Normally, it is therefore used to sustain large herds of animals, because unless it's made into kibble, it is again not consumable by humans, but we are making it into kibble, and therefore I would say it's a great choice for our small colony here. And once again, you can see Steak and Edmo are working together, and so all of the required plants are in the ground in no time. Steak now goes back to researching while Edmo continues with the fieldwork, or more specifically with the preparations, as he is now removing the roof over our cotton field. While he does that, my routine check of the wildlife tab also reveals a group of dromedaries on the map, so we should keep that in mind for a potential hunting trip later down the line. For now though, we have more work to do around the base. More specifically, we want to dig 2 graves just north of our cotton field. And the reason for that is actually much less spectacular than you might think. There are simply 2 corpses lying around in this location, and those always have a negative mood impact on our colonists whenever they pass by, and as long as we don't have Molotov cocktails or anything else to burn them with, a grave is the easiest way to get these corpses out of sight. Once that has been taken care of, Steak can return to the research bench while Edmo is sowing out cotton plants. Let's hope that this time everything goes smoothly and the plants actually reach maturity. Now at this point we should probably focus on a proper bed for Edmo. To construct one, however, we need a bit more steel. Luckily, we still have that large steel ruin to the north of our base, so let's send our 2 colonists out there to gather what they can. As you can see, this is a great way to quickly acquire a good amount of materials, so after barely 2 hours of work, we can already send Steak and Edmo back to the base. As Edmo is heading out a second time to collect the rest, we then have trouble arrive in the desert, in the form of today's first raid. And with our colony growing a bit, both in personnel and in wealth, it is no surprise that our attackers are a bit more numerous this time. They are, however, still only carrying melee weapons, so this should hopefully not be too much of an issue. Since they are not attacking immediately, we have some time to continue working, and thanks to all the steel we grabbed, we can now construct a real bed for our new colonist Edmo. After a few moments of construction, we can see, unlike Steak's bed, it is sadly only of normal quality, so Edmo won't quite receive the luxurious comfort that Steak receives every night, but then again he also does not need to rest for as long as Steak needs to, so in the end I would say it all balances out. At this point we of course have no more need for the bedroll, so that one can be hauled back into the storage room. However, Edmo's bedroom is a bit scantily furnished at the moment, but there is something we can do about that. In Steak's bedroom we have a lovely limestone sculpture, but since Steak also has a few other pieces of furniture to improve his room's ambience, we can move that sculpture over to Edmo's bedroom without issue. In the end, Edmo now actually has the more beautiful bedroom, but over time this will likely even out, and in the short term it should not be a problem. Now Edmo also immediately spent some time inspecting his new decor. His session is being interrupted though by the pirates who have begun their assault. Now off-screen I actually gave the bolt-action rifle to Edmo because he is a slightly better shooter, while Steak is sporting the short bow to still have a bit of range. Unfortunately though, even with that range, both Steak and Edmo don't get much of a chance to do some damage here. Our attackers have closed the distance way too quickly and we have to retreat back into the base now. It looks as if that is not much of a problem though, because our 2 traps near the base entrance appear to be quite attractive. And yes, there we go, with more than 50% of their numbers defeated, our attackers are officially running. Since there is only 1 pirate left, I don't think we need to hunt them down. We can, however, quickly construct graves for the 2 right here, so that their bodies don't even start to rot out in the open and cause mood penalties for our colonists. Speaking of mood penalties, just as Edmo is about to head over to grab one last meal before heading to bed here, he unfortunately suffers a mental break and starts to wander around in sadness. The kibble-based diet, the lack of sleep, and perhaps also the first signs of ambrosia withdrawal, those might all be contributing factors. In any case, there is not much we can do about it at this point, so we'll simply let him wander while Steak gets some rest. In the early morning hours then, Edmo also finally staggers off to bed. His breakdown has come to an end, but at this time he needs some sleep. Steak, meanwhile, is well rested just a few hours later, and he can now put the 2 traps back in place which were destroyed in the raid earlier. Thanks to his quick sleeper trait, Edmo is also back up on his feet not too long after, and with Steak still in construction mode, let's keep going with that. I mentioned earlier that his room might require some slight beautification, and constructing a limestone plant pot will hopefully achieve that. Inside of it, we can then have Edmo plant a daylily. This will give this small object a moderate beauty rating of 18, hopefully enough to keep Steak happy. Happiness, meanwhile, is still a bit far-fetched for Edmo, who is in fact already suffering from ambrosia withdrawal. At -10, the mood penalty for this is not too severe, but with one mental break already behind us, I would not be too optimistic at this point. So let us instead have him focus on more important things. After hauling our attacker's weapons back into the storage room, Edmo can now do some butchering, because as you can see here, in just a few hours the 5 corpses would spoil anyway. At this time, we sadly don't have any plant matter to actually produce kibble, but as Steak is showing us here, meat can very well be eaten raw. Now, with the addition of Edmo, we also have a very competent gardener in our colony, and we can actually use that to our advantage and now plant Healroot. Healroot is locked behind a plant skill of 8, a skill level that Steak, by the way, has not yet reached, but Edmo is a bit more advanced and can therefore now get a small field going. Once fully grown, we can then harvest herbal medicine from these plants, and I think it's safe to say that you can never have enough of that. With the field in place, it then doesn't take long until both Edmo and Steak are technically ready for bedtime, but our 3 dromedaries are also still on the map, and because it looks like they are about to wander off, let's seize the moment here and start a small hunting trip. One of the animals appears to be heading south, so we're not running after that, but one of its companions is coming straight at us, and that seems like a great target. And shooting with 2 colonists at once, of course, makes the task a whole lot easier, so after just a few volleys, the first dromedary here goes down. A second one is lying in the sand not too far away and currently sleeping, so let's sneak up on it and present it with a violent surprise. Okay, and that didn't take too long either. 2 animals are down, 1 for each colonist to carry, the third one has sadly already escaped, but this right here is still nothing to complain about. With the corpses dropped off, it is then time to go to bed, and so we can skip ahead to the next morning, and we can watch Edmo gather some sandstone here by removing several stone floor tiles west of our base. Now, this right here serves 2 purposes. Number 1, of course, the acquisition of building materials, but it also clears that relatively large brown patch of dirt from any floor tiles blocking it. That is important because that dirt patch will soon become another growing zone, and of course we want to maximize the space available to us. First of all, though, we will use the sandstone to construct a dresser and an end table for Edmo, mainly of course to increase the comfort rating of his bed, but perhaps, depending on construction quality, also another small beauty bonus to his room. And our 2 colonists are once again working together on this project, with Steak taking care of the dresser and Edmo constructing the end table. While they're working, we also have another group of visitors appear, and once again they have a few items to trade. Before we take a look at their wares though, Edmo constructs a normal quality end table, so nothing out of the ordinary here, while Steak finishes the dresser, and it is also of normal quality. Combined, they are now improving the bed's comfort rating to 0.85, and that is indeed pretty comfortable. Now at this point we have a small issue starting to develop, because as you can see, Edmo is suffering from the initial signs of heatstroke. I mentioned this back when he first joined us. His outfit is sadly not protecting him all that well against the heat, but hopefully we can do something about that soon. While we're on the topic of his outfit though, we can quickly get rid of his bearskin parka here. He definitely does not need it for this climate, and with traders nearby we might be able to fetch a good price for it. So with the parka in the storage room, let's see what these traders here have to offer. Okay, sadly their supplies are looking very manageable as well, but as planned we can in fact sell the parka here, as well as the club and mace that we took off of our attackers a few moments ago. Apart from that, there is not much we can do apart from purchasing 1 unit of herbal medicine. In the end, we are still making a healthy profit from this trade, and again, medicine is something you can never have enough of. While Edmo is carrying the new supplies into the storage room, we have good news from the research bench. Steak has finished his research into complex clothing, and so we have now unlocked a variety of clothing items to manufacture, as well as the utensils to actually make them in the form of a tailor bench. And with those things unlocked, and therefore help inside for Edmo's temperature problems, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut in today's episode. A high note is always great to end on, and I think this episode was very successful. We finally obtained our second colonist, all of our fields are growing again, we made some money, we grew our base, and we also made some technological advancements. All in all, there is hardly anything to complain about after today, so let's hope that trend continues in the next episode. Until then, as always, I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already, or you can also check out and maybe pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.